thanks everybody who's able to join today. As Dana mentioned, I'm Craig Dubler, the Associate Director of Facilities for the College of Engineering at Penn State. Prior to that, I was the BIM Director for the university and was heavily involved in implementing what Penn State does from the BIM side. So what I want to talk about today is specific to BIM for FM and really hone in on how to provide what the owners need from a data and information perspective. Not what they want, but what they actually need and how to even discover that. So I will be monitoring the chat too, so I'll do my best. If there's any questions, feel free, because I do like the idea of having, a discussion. So if there's any questions I can answer throughout my presentation, I'd be happy to do so. So I talked a little bit about myself. I don't like to do it often, but just to tell you, I have a pretty well-rounded background. I was part of the BIM Execution Planning Guide that was derived from Penn State research. I worked in DC construction area for 5 years after my undergraduate degree, came back for my PhD. And that's when I started getting into BIM and how we can do things better. So I think throughout my career, how I was successful, or I think how people are successful, is just saying there's got to be a better way. And, my research has kind of led to that. And it was helpful with what previous research was done, but just saying there's got to be a better way has lead to the implementation of lean in construction. It's led to the development of integrated project delivery. It's led to the develop and the influence of BIM, what we're here to talk about. And hopefully, people saying there's got to be a better way of doing things, or this just doesn't work, will leading to the future of BIM for FM. We're going to be talking about the tip of the iceberg now, but more robotics, automation. I'm really excited to be involved in where we're at for an industry. But paying homage to the studies that have come before us. If you haven't heard these, great. It's new to you. If you have, I'm sorry, it's a refresher. But Paul Teicholz out of Stanford looked at the construction industry in the early 60s all the way up to 2000s, and we just weren't keeping up with manufacturing. Whether you agree, with the numbers or not, I don't think that's important. But we know that construction was not as efficient as manufacturing, and that's actually led to a lot of lean and IPD studies. And then in the early 2000s, Patrick McLeamy out of HOK looked at, this what's known as the McLeamy curve. Curve number 4. If we start making decisions earlier on in the design process, it actually costs less and adds more value. So we should integrate it as a team. Led to more design build, led to more integrated project delivery, as well as started this idea of sharing information with teams. So final study I just want to just chat about is NIST in 2004. They talked about the cost of interoperability, or just not sharing information on our projects. And that cost the industry an exorbitant amount of money, just us being siloed. And this has really led to a lot of BIM research. And I know at Penn State, we were able to get a pretty decent grant with helping to try to solve this problem with interoperability from the BIM Execution Planning Guide. At the same time, how can we do it from a Penn State owner perspective? So what is BIM for facility owners? So I'm going to put my owner hat on. At Penn State, if I'm getting a project delivered to me, what do I expect? And believe it or not, I don't care a lot about the models. Only where it adds value. So BIM to me is information management. So how can I get the information I need to continue being successful in facilities, or maybe look at increasing my options or my interoperabilities or information that is available to me and taking advantage of it. So what types of information are available to me as a facility manager slash owner? Well, there are models, and there's a purpose for that. I'm not saying there's not a purpose, but sometimes we put a pretty good value to models where it might be too complex for some owners. It definitely provides wayfinding, or it provides, where things are, or maybe components, as built conditions, record model conditions. But there's also the most important thing to us is the data, that comes out of that. And I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but that's what I, tend to care about is, okay, what can I pull from these models? What about that air handling unit is important for me to maintain it? What is important to me about the space where I can operate it? At the same time, over building in general, where I can look at security, safety options. We also have to pay homage to the stuff we forget about, right? They're still drawings and we're still using drawings, so we can't forget that that's still important to a lot of owners. And I'd probably say just as important as data is documents. So I can do this export of a large amount of data, but if you give me an O&M document that has the information in it and I can get that in the field to my technicians, that's extremely important. And I just don't want to forget about that from a turnover standpoint. And last but not least, it does get overlooked a lot, but there's so much knowledge that's produced on our design and construction projects that just doesn't get turned over. So how can we do that in a better fashion where we take advantage of the vendors, the subcontractors' knowledge from an installation standpoint and turn that over, turn that over to the owner. So, I've presented this, around the country, but it's the idea that I have for maximizing the benefits of BIM for FM. So if every project knew this, it didn't really matter what your owner was, if you just got to know your owner, what they cared about, and what you could do from a facilities management, these are kind of the keys that I came up with. So first is begin with the end in mind. So just think about the owner, just get to understand them, what information they actually care about, how they want it delivered. Collaborate effectively, so actually come up with a plan to do that. That plan will be extremely overwhelming at first. So have the ability to actually break down that plan and focus on key turnovers. So I think that's kind of a missing part that we had when we put the BIM execution plan together at Penn State is it was overwhelming. It was this 20-page document. Okay, we have a plan. But if you couldn't break it down and you couldn't actually deliver certain things, I think it got overwhelming, and it doesn't mean that you could actually execute that plan. So if you focus on turnovers, that's the key to execution. So the idea of beginning with the end in mind, just some questions to ask any owners, in my opinion, is, what's the purpose of the facility? Why is this even being built? Who's the stakeholders that are attached to this project? Who's going to occupy, operate, and maintain? That may be one entity, that may be 3 entities, but then that there may be 3 people from a stakeholder perspective that are going to be requesting information at turnover. Once you do know who those stakeholders are, what information do they need to do their jobs effectively? That can be difficult because they may get overwhelmed by the terms of models. Hey, what would you do with the model? But maybe just ask simply, what information do you need to do your job right now and in the future? Who's going to maintain the information? So I truly believe that information, if it's not maintained, it becomes legacy information. It will become obsolete at some point in time. So if an owner's not going to maintain it, be careful of how much effort you put into it. But if you do know somebody's going to maintain it, those are the stakeholders you want to get a hold of, because they will be able to speak intelligently to how they want that information organized, when they want it delivered, and what they need. So not overwhelming, but just important to Penn State's success of facilities management using information. So taking one more step into, and we had this kind of conversation before we got on, is we tend to think of facilities management in general fashion. We think of operations and maintenance, we think of space management, but in these large campus projects, or these large campus owners or multi-facility owners, facilities management is a business, and it has all the parts and pieces of the business. So certain people might care about different things. So I think it's a good example. Michael Thoreau talked about the FN wheel, and I think it's a good example because when we talk about operations and maintenance and the value stream that we're delivering on projects for operations and maintenance with this data, it is only one slice of the pie. So you can see why, it may be important for owners, but it's one part and piece to the success of facilities management. However, I'll throw up a couple of examples here of where we've seen success in BIM for facilities management at Penn State. First and foremost is just on our projects. We do model walkthroughs, and we request model walkthroughs. This is a picture of a department head for chemistry, and he's looking through at the Whitmore building on campus. This lovely lady here in red is the super TA for chemistry. I can't make that up. She's in charge of all the TAs, and she's actually called the super TA. So those two specifically were really good stakeholders just to look at the facility. who you can't see in the picture, who always sits in the back, is actually our maintenance technicians. We also invite them to all of our model reviews so they can see what's important to the department heads, the TAs, the occupants, but then we reverse the situation. We start going over some other areas like the basement, or the mechanical spaces, the electrical spaces, and the department head and the super TA got to see what was important to the maintenance crew. So I'll show you what this looks like. So this is our Whitmore project. We took a Revit model, exported it into Autodesk, and turned it into Unity. So we took it from Revit into Unity, and then basically put some displays on top of it. So we turned it into a Unity model that you could walk around. So we could go on the roof, look at the height of our exhaust fans for this facility, talk a lot about safety with our technicians to be able to access that space, maintain it. We can go into a lab fairly quickly, and we learned, this is in design development, that this cabinet can't be here, as well as we may want to actually look at where this fume hood is located or relocate these fume hoods, because the TA, when this TA stands here, they have to watch potentially two different areas of students. So they can't see the whole way down the table. So from a wayfinding perspective, we can see that. We also look at the basement, and I don't know why we always put MEP spaces in the basement, but it just so happens. We could do a walkthrough of the basement and just look at where, sorry, it's been a while since I got to walk through this model. I lost my edge. But anyways, we can walk through the basement and get to see, some parts and pieces that are important, to the technicians. We can see, their rooms, what kind of equipment they have in their space, how the layout of the area is going to be, where they need to, access and get through certain filter changes and equipment. This is an example of a heat exchanger. This is a air handling unit space with a heat exchanger. We have an avatar here, where we could walk around and start looking at some ergonomic features to make sure that they're safe when they're doing their maintenance. And like I said before, we also kept the TA and the department head as part of these reviews, just so they could see what it takes to actually operate and maintain their facilities. So I think they both learn a lot in these, we call them virtual walkthroughs, schematic design, design development, and one prior to bid, just to make sure we captured all of the changes necessary. This is a slideshow so Keith asked about Unity. I'll send you a link to the Penn State has a script of how to take it from Revit to Unity. Pretty much it is free to take it into Unity, I can definitely share that link after this, and it's fairly straightforward. Depends what you want to do from a finishes perspective and a lighting perspective. You can spend a lot of time doing that, but if you're just looking at space and wayfinding, it's pretty quick. So FAM programs, this is the technology side of FM at Penn State. And this just shows you the plethora of systems that is actually used as an owner. So we have Abacus, which is our financial system. Docfinity is our document management system, legacy documents. Lionspace FIS is our space management system. ArcGIS is our utilities mapping, done in GIS. Maximo is our IBM Maximo is our asset management tool. And Tririga and eBuilder, now it's just eBuilder, is our PMIS, Project Management Information System. And this just kind of gives you the same thing as a project, how we have to get these systems to work together. As a company, these large owners, have the same IT infrastructure, and a lot of it is integrated. So it's not as easy sometimes as just sharing model information, but we have to focus on what part and piece do we want to integrate to facilities management. So here's a quick snapshot of just asset management at Penn State. So if I was to kind of say BIM at Penn State, what we focused on getting data in the technician's hands. So this was an iPod Touch at one point in time. Now they have iPhone, I think they have iPhone 11s now, where they have a pretty decent screen, but they can carry them in their pouches. And they have access to O&M manuals. They have access to Maximo to actually record information. They have barcoding where they can get that asset information and make decisions in the field, and they have access to the model. So to get there, we had to obviously collaborate effectively. So each of our projects, we develop a BIM plan to make sure that happens. This is a 4-step process to develop a BIM plan. I do strongly urge that each of your projects have a decent BIM plan. One, to determine what you're going to do on a project, but specifically where you're going to deliver at the end of the project.
And like I think that's probably what most of us think about when we think about Penn State, right? Is the PXP or the BIM execution, the BEP or whatever anybody wants to call it, right? I feel like whenever you look up BIM execution plan, you're going to find resources related to Penn State.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, and we're always trying to sharpen that too. So if there's something you found with the BIM PXP that you like or something you want changed, you know, there's a website, bim.psu.edu. I have it in my references at the end. I would love to hear more collaboration on that, or things that we want to change with it, or some keys to success so we can make it better for the industry. Yeah, thanks, Dana. And then finally, the key to success is focusing on turnovers. And this is kind of exciting, but at least to me. But once we found out that, okay, we know what data we want at the end of the day, and we can put together in Revit, you know, a list, or at least either families, common families for certain types of pieces of equipment, or we can just do shared parameters, you know, with different asset types. We can then deliver that and start requesting information at different phases of the project. So when I say focus on deliverable, we just contractually obligate design entities at the end of the day to get to a certain amount of information or legacy information about that piece of equipment. And then design to construction, we determined, and this is a very difficult decision for us, but not to keep it in the model, but to pull it out in Excel, because it was easier for the contractors to not fill out Revit information in the field. It was easier to keep it in Excel, where they could actually put construction information, so O&M information, or I'm sorry, submittal information, as well as installation information, barcode our equipment when it's being installed, and just completely filling out this, you know, for us for when we're thinking about asset management. And that was a big, you know, tough thing for us, because we always wanted to stay in the model. We said the model is it, it's where it is, but at the end of the day, it didn't really matter if it was in Excel or it was in the model. It just cared that we got it organized correctly and that the information was filled out the way we needed it. So once again, getting the owners what they need. And then we had to take that information and pull it into Maximo. So you might have heard of Kobe. You know, it'd be great if Kobe was aligned. And Kobe is great, you know, has opportunities, as well as, you know, if the software is perfectly in line with the owner's recommendations. If their owner's recommendation changes, or if the software may not accept Kobe the way it's defined, you have to kind of do a manual manipulation of that data. So unfortunately we did, because a lot of our asset parameters were set up in a different way from a legacy perspective. So we kind of had to define our own information structure. But we take that data, import it into Maximo, attach O&M manuals, which is probably even more important than a lot of that data, and it gets maintained within Maximo from an asset management and a maintenance perspective. So, you know, that's kind of Penn State in a nutshell, what we're doing from BIM for FM. You know, I guess I would say if you had an owner that didn't know what they wanted, you know, these are some questions I would probably ask them, and I'll share these slides. But, you know, just trying to help turn over some rocks, you know, whether they have any BIM standards or what existing systems or softwares do you have, you know, what decisions or who makes your decisions, you know, who's the most important thing. Good question. So Heather asked, you know, do I have any idea the percentage of responsibility of who's filling out that asset information? It's about 25% designer, 75% contractor. As a matter of fact, we also have the contractor validate the information that's in design through the submittal phase too. So that's part of the process.
So a lot of times probably it's the designer who's actually just putting the line item there,
Yep.
and then the contractor who's filling out the data.
That's right. So we ask the design team to fill out design intent information, right? So capacities and things that really why we're designing it or to the level of design intent. And then the contractors are filling out submittal/installation information. I'm trying to generalize a little bit, but Magdalena asked about more details about Revit models with Maximo. Yeah, so we took Maximo, kind of reversed engineer it, like these are the specifications for each asset classification, turned those into either shared parameters or Revit families, and we published those on bim.psu.edu or opp.bim.psu.edu for our design teams or contractor teams to take those and import them into the either Revit, or they have it as Excel. They can fill out an Excel template with those data. As long as we don't change the column names, it actually works pretty well. If we do, we have to do a little bit of quality control to make sure that happens. My time's almost up here, so I'll just kind of wrap this up and show you some links. So, I think just the key takeaways. The owner needs to be involved, with your project anyway. You should really push for an owner representative to make BIM decisions. You're going to, as a team member, increase your capabilities as you move forward or along with projects. What I'd ask is, not to overcomplicate things and try to push the model to owners that don't need it. Some owners may still be using or just getting up to speed with CAD, on their CAFM systems or space management/asset management, and their systems may not even accept it. So that model is just going to sit there and rot. We don't want that as an industry either. So don't overcomplicate it. Understand, the purpose of the data. Make sure there is a purpose. If not, it shouldn't be there. And our models should be much simpler. Like I said, these are the references that I talked about. I'll make sure I put one in here too for BIM to Unity, Revit to Unity. There is a good link for that that the Penn State researcher put together. And last but not least, if you're interested in kind of joining the movement either from BIM to FM or just the national BIM standard, I sit on the board of directors for NIBS Building Smart Alliance, and they're currently going through the National BIM Standard version 4. They're soliciting members to be part of the work group, and I know Nick, he can share a link here to that if anybody is interested in joining it. You do have to be a Building Smart member to volunteer. I think it's approximately $100 a year to be a Building Smart member, but they are looking for people to help with these work groups. And I have a link for each of these work groups if you want to see anything more. For example, the core BIM requirements, I think that's a really good work group, but they're looking at defining what if we were to give an owner any bit of information, if we said BIM for an owner, this is just the core things that you have to do to say that you're doing BIM on your project. So it's just a core BIM work group, and I think it's exciting to start aligning some things that I think the UK has already done really well. Yes, thank you. So TJ said the NIBS, Building Smart Alliance is now NIBS BIM Council. Yes, we did go through a renaming of that. So thanks, TJ, for defining that. Yep. So you have to become a member of NIBS to support it. So that's my time. Thank you, and I'll stick around for the discussion later on.